studies show we can only really have, 4, 5, 10 close friendships, then let's lean in hard on those, the ones that the Lord's put in front of us, and let's value those where they are.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast, helping leaders live with integrity.
So many of us think that we've got to clean up our lives and get them all in order for God to really use us. And, if you're like me, you really love a good clean house. It brings peace. But the reality is, what if actually God uses our messes, and that the messes are a part of his big plan in our life and in the life of his kingdom?
For sure. Cynthia Yanof is a wife, mother, podcaster, blogger, and everyday lady who is ridiculously committed to not taking herself too seriously. I like this. Yeah, absolutely. Cynthia worked as an attorney before pursuing a career encouraging and equipping women in their God-given callings. She currently hosts the popular MESSmerized podcast, and many Christians are also familiar with her work for ChristianParenting.org, as well as her time as the creator and host of the ministry's Pardon the Mess podcast. She loves speaking, writing, foster care, and hanging out in Dallas with her husband, Mike, and 3 kids. Cynthia, it's really good to have you with us today.
Guys, thanks for having me. How are you?
We're good. Okay, so I have to ask you a question because you are the woman to ask. Is Jesus coming back to Dallas? Because I feel like everybody and their grandma is from Dallas who has some sort of big kingdom ministry.
It used to be Colorado Springs.
Yeah, but somehow it moved over to Dallas.
Yeah, we're all in Dallas now. I think it's because of chips and queso. And so, I do think Jesus will come back here first, for sure. But I will also tell you that I was on one of the big tollways, freeways the other day, and it was like traffic time and nobody was on it. And I was like, oh, this is it. Jesus came back and I was the left behind. Like I had no behind. It was me. It was me.
To share the news.
But at least you had
Jesus.
Chips and queso. I mean,
Right.
at least that's still around.
Yeah. I've had those moments too where I thought, I'm one of the few.
Where is everyone?
Where did everyone go? Oh, I love it. Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about your journey in realizing that God uses mess. We want to hear all about your messy story, Cynthia. So start with just telling us more about you.
Yeah, well, y'all are sweet. I think that I've always used that word mess. My first podcast was Pardon the Mess, and my new one is called MESSmerized with 2 S's with mess. My book is Life is Messy, God is Good. And I think that's because literally I like you. I like a clean house. I like things orderly and to go in a certain fashion. And that's just not how it has worked in my parenting and my faith walk and anything. And I feel like I've been trying so hard as a girl who grew up in church to clean up the messes so that God can use me, so that it'll look a certain way. So all these things will line up. And then I'm realizing no, it's actually in the mess, biblically speaking, and in the realities of our lives. Like that's where God shows up in the mess. And so I was thinking about just like last year, my son was playing football, my high school son, and it's such a long story. I'm going to make it very short. He didn't get to play much, and it was his junior year, and he really expected to be on the field a lot more, and he was so frustrated. And end of the season comes, and we're all like, wow, man, that was a bummer. And we go to the football banquet, and the coach calls him up at the end. And I'm like, why are they giving an award to this kid? He didn't even play. And he named him the most valuable player on the scout team. And he talked to you, the scout team is the team that gets the real team ready for the game, right? He didn't say it that way. I am. But what he did in that moment was he took a perceived failure and named it a success. And I think that's where I fall in the mess of everything. There's these perceived failures, these perceived hard places where we're getting it wrong, or it's not looking the way it's supposed to. It went off script. Well, like, what if we could change the lens and rename it as success, trusting that God's going to do stuff in these hard places, that he's working in the places we can't see. And so for me, that's where kind of the messes come along. I'm like, okay, stop cleaning it up. Stop trying to make it look a certain way to be postable. Like instead, let's just embrace and lean in to those hard places.
I love it. Stop making it look postable.
Yes, totally.
Oh man.
Okay, so you're often quoted saying, when did it all become so serious? Why are you so passionate about seeing life through the lens of humor, especially the ups and downs in everyday life? I'm catching this from you just even in the way in which you're talking about what you shared already, but tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, yeah, I naturally come by a family that's been funny. Like I grew up in a family that laughed a lot and just didn't take ourselves seriously. And I think, well, I'm so thankful for that. That's a gift, I think, to be able to laugh at myself and laugh at others. And it's one that we've really worked on in our kids, like just being able to laugh. Don't take yourself so seriously. And I remember my mom used to tell me early on when I was parenting, she would say, if you're going to laugh about it in a year, like, why not laugh about it now? And that's not always easy to do. I'll be the first to say, one of my kids in a private Christian school in kindergarten flipped off the kids in the cafeteria. And I got the call. I was teaching a Bible study for the school. And I got the call and I'm like, oh my gosh. And, I go through this whole series of things. Like I've got to call in like everyone and that's all the administrators and make sure they know that like Mike and I don't flip people off. Like, I don't know where he got it. He's a troubled kid. Like I'm going through all this in my mind. And my mom's like, listen, are you going to laugh about this later? And I'm like, yeah, probably. And here we are like 12 years later, you guys, I'm laughing about it. I've written about it. And that's the thing is that so many places in our life that we can take it real seriously, or we can realize that like, listen, someday this is going to be a really good story. And so, yes, did I discipline my child? Do we take the right steps to, yes, get on the right track? Of course we did. But the thing is like, just generally speaking in our faith walk, even aside from parenting, so many places where the Lord puts us, like where we have his favor, we know we have God's favor, those places look unfavorable. And so we've got to be willing to just say, okay, this is hard. This is messy. This is the difficult stuff. Like we're going to laugh a little bit about it. And yeah, are there really hard things out there? Absolutely. I'm not saying we just all walk around Pollyanna, but I do think that 90% of the things I've obsessed over, not slept over, worried about, cleaned up, tried to rephrase or reframe, like those things just didn't matter. So why not laugh about it a little bit?
It takes us a
Healthy.
while to learn that.
Yeah, really healthy. And you can see the joy and the humor in your eyes. I hope that's
Oh, thank you
encouraging
for
to you.
that.
You're welcome.
Well, Cynthia, okay, so talk about your family, the ages of your kids. I have so many questions, so let's start there, and then I'll ask my second one when we're done with that one. But what are their
Yeah.
stages, and then what are the key things you're learning at their stages of life right now
Yeah.
as a parent?
That's a good question because I have all ages. I feel like sometimes I'm a unicorn. I have a college kid, so junior in college, and I have a junior in high school. So girl on the top, boy in the middle, and then I have a first grader. And so yeah, like all kinds of things. We laugh around here all the time. Nobody ever told me that I was going to be like navigating like launching a kid into college and menopause with a first grader. I mean, like nobody told me all this was coming my way. But yeah, those are the ages we're in. And in terms of like there's so much I could say about the different stages. And I feel so bad. I'm sure y'all did too. I feel so bad for my firstborn. Like I just killed it, like over parenting her, like poor child. And now my third one, I'm like, I feel so bad for you. Like I barely care now. I mean, I love you with all I've got, but barely. I'm no room mom anymore. No, ma'am. I'm not doing that anymore. And all the things now that I'm like, it's interesting that the dichotomy between first and last, especially with all these years. But I will say when my daughter was getting ready to go to college a couple of years ago, I pulled out like her baby book, like the scrapbook baby book thing. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to go through this and relive it before she goes to college. I opened it and I was like, oh man, that's too bad. The only thing in there was like her baby bracelet. Apparently I didn't even do it for the first kid. And so I went on this mission, you guys. I'm like, well, watch me go. She had gone on a senior trip and I was putting that baby book / scrapbook together. I was going to do it all in a week while she was gone. And so I went and got all the boxes with like kindergarten graduation and blah, blah, all the pictures. I did the whole thing. And at the end, I sat down to go through it. And I was like, this is going to be my cry fest because I was struggling. My oldest was going to college and I went through it. And it was so interesting as I'm flipping through the pages of a scrapbook, like, I remember obsessing over like, are we in the right preschool? And well, we stayed up all night to get in the right one time. I'm air quoting right one, by the way, you guys. And then I looked at like, these, was she in the right friend groups? I saw her some friends and I worried about that. And I went through all these stages. Middle school, she was so gawky and awkward. Her hair was greasy and ugh. And then I go to high school and I see like, oh my gosh, like this is where she's becoming who she is now. And as I went through this whole thing and I ended up closing the scrapbook, instead of lamenting all that had passed, I was like, oh my gosh, like who gets to do this? Like, how good is God that we get to raise these kids? And I can look back through it now, having launched one and say like all the things that were supposed to be the big things, they were the small things. And all the small things ended up being the big things. And so all those things I obsessed over, yeah, some of the big things mattered, but all the things I really thought were the critical key components, they weren't. But those things like riding around in the car with them, taking to practices, those conversations, sitting with them on Friday night when they're the only one that didn't get invited to the party, all those places, man, those were the game changers. And so I think that's maybe the perspective now that I have the benefit of because I have a 20-year-old down to a 7-year-old.
I love it. My daughter just the other day was like, Mom, I really miss you. Now she's a junior in high school. And I was like, wait, it's not like you moved out. I mean, where did I go? Am I busy? Am I working too much? And she goes, no, we just don't get to ride in the car anymore.
Mm.
She's driving everywhere. And I just thought, yeah, all that time from when she was tiny
Yeah.
to these teen years, you just have that white space together, driving and talking. And it really is a connecting time that is annoying for a lot of us parents. We're like, oh, I got to get in the car again. We go back and forth and all the gas and the time and the inefficiency of it. So I love you speaking to that it
No.
doesn't seem like a big thing, but it is a big thing. There's a lot that happens in those moments.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so my other question before Jeff gets the mic, you were a lawyer
Yeah.
and then you left your job as a lawyer. Talk about that a little bit, in terms of like your phases of leadership and your choices in life and how that plays into what you've learned in this season.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. I went to law school and nobody else in my family was a lawyer. I don't know that I knew what I was getting into. What I did understand after 4 years of college was that I was going to have to get a job and like be an adult. And I was like, peace out on that. So I'll go to law school. Like that seemed logical to me. And I did. And thankfully, I met my husband there. So I just know God uses all things. But honestly, you guys, I was a horrible lawyer. Now, I don't think the law firm thought so. I mean, they loved me. And the year I was to make partner. I quit, but like it just never like gelled for me. Like I watched my husband, he's such a great attorney. And for me, it was just so hard to do now the things I do come so much more naturally. Work hard, yes, but they come from God's giftings for me. It just wasn't my thing. And so I remember one day sitting there, I was like on the 40th floor of a downtown Dallas law firm. And looking out the window, and I mean, I guess if you want to judge success by that, I could have been like, okay, here I'm in this great office downtown, and all these people that work for me and whatever. And then I just had that hollow feeling. I was like, I don't think this is it for me. Like, and that's just the Holy Spirit. And so I remember stopping and just closing my eyes. I'm like, Lord, if there's something more, if there's something different, I'll do it. But you just got to make it obvious. And I mean, listen, when you just open your palms to the Lord and just say, what is it? Whatever you want for me. When he puts that, like if you grew up in church, that holy discontent is what we call it. When he puts that on you, if you'll just surrender a little bit, my goodness, does he change the plan? And so, yeah, within a year, we got called to do foster care and got involved with that. I stopped practicing law, was asked to work for a ministry that y'all know all very well. I've done some ministries and Christian parenting and ran their parenting sector. And like the Lord just took all these, just a reluctant yes, and he like ran with it. And so here we are now podcasting and just having written this, my first book. And it's really been interesting to see the road that the Lord has taken.
I love it.
Okay, so Cynthia, many people, as you know, they're living in survival mode today, just trying to make it. And, how have what you call the creeks and caves convinced you that hope isn't only found on the other side of the mess, but in the middle of it? I mean, tell us a little bit more about these creeks and caves.
That's such a I think it's a hard lesson. And so often I know you guys experience this too, guys, when you're talking to people and they're discouraged or disappointed in God. It's so often it's because we don't know if he's with us. Where is he? Why is it quiet? Why am I still in this situation? And I lived that a little bit in foster care. I went through a period of time where the Lord could have in a moment fixed what we were walking through, and he just didn't. And it was hard, and we thought we were going to lose the little boy that had been with us a couple of years, and the scenario he would have gone to would, in our opinion, probably in anybody's opinion, would not have been favorable, and just so legally complex of a case, which is comical with two lawyers, right? That we had this legally complex foster care case. But I remember one day walking in our neighborhood down this little area that has a church and a little bridge. And I live in the middle of the city. So it's funny that they have this little prairie land area. But anyway, I went down there and I was standing at this bridge and I felt like the Lord, I was just like, Lord, like, where are you? Why are you ghosting me? Like, this is the hardest thing I've walked to. Never would have chosen this. You picked foster care, not us. Like, what? And I feel like the Lord was just like, go down by that creek bed. Well, that's real weird. I'm not one of those people that like sees Jesus on my toast or anything. Like, I'm like, wait, what? You're asking me to go to the creek bed? And so I went down there and I have tears in my eyes. And again, I'm still in the middle of my neighborhood. I know these people walking by. I'm like, And as I'm doing this, I felt like the Lord saying, like, pick up a rock, pick up a stone. I started thinking about the Israelites. And, after they would cross through and the water was parted, right? They would build an altar and they would stack stones. So they'd never forget what God did. And all of a sudden, like, I felt like the Lord was saying, you need to stack some stones. And so I did. Like, I stacked a stone for when my husband had encephalitis, but he he didn't die. And I stacked a stone for 3 healthy kids. I stacked a stone, for a time when we needed a job and desperately, and the Lord gave us that. And again, hear me, these weren't like lack of hardship places, but places where the Lord was faithful. And as I was
Mm.
stacking those stones, I thought kind of Elijah too. Remember Elijah, and he's frustrated and waiting to hear from God. And God doesn't show up in the earthquake, right? And all the things. He shows up in the gentle whisper. And in that moment, like I realized that the Lord's saying, listen, I'm not necessarily a remove the hardship kind of God. I'm a remember who I am kind of God. And in that moment, like remembering all the places he's been faithful. Well, he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so in that creek bed, as I'm stacking stones, I'm like, okay, the Lord's been faithful before. Not always been the way I've wanted it to look like, almost never been the timing I would ask for, but he has been faithful and he's been good. And so in that, I think that's what I'm learning about God is that, yeah, in the middle of those hardship and those hard places, you guys, he may not remove the obstacle, but he will show you who he is. And so coming from a place of gratitude and stones of remembrance, like I think that's key when God's quiet.
That's so good, Cynthia. And so often we're just moving on to like seeing the circumstance or kind of looking ahead of the way we think it's supposed to go instead of pausing and looking back and seeing who he is despite the
Yeah.
hardship. Um, and just even that physical practice that God gave the Israelites that you were doing in your
Yeah.
neighborhood of stacking stones as a remembrance. It's such a profound reminder. Like as you're sharing it as if you're right there again. And the
Yeah.
moment to stop and pause and to remember is something that I think all of us forget to do. And so reminding our audience today to do that, but even thinking about even the ages of our kids and the things that we've seen happen in their lives already and when we're hoping for some things to come. You have more to
Yeah.
say on that?
Can I? I was going to add one other thing, and just in terms of stacking stones, just practically speaking, it may be corny to some, but it works for me. I have stones. Literally, I'm reaching for one. Hold on, everyone.
Love it.
For those that are watching and not just listening, like I have them. I have one here that says "Remember." This is, and it has the date of adoption for our little one. I have another one over here that has gratitude, and it has a date from another stone that has a date on it that means something to us. I have calendar reminders that pop up every year, days where I just know God showed up in a situation. Like stacking stones can be quite literal, right? Like for me, it was in a creek bed, but it's also, I think, just that putting things in place that remind you of God's goodness, because you need to be reminded. I need to be reminded, and so yeah, whether that's calendar reminders, maybe that's physical stones. Like I have, in my life, one of the biggest stones of remembrance we have is our little boy. When he runs around, even when he's driving me nuts, my precious 7-year-old, I'm like that's a stone of remembrance because I prayed for that. I mean, I prayed for that little boy. Cried next to a crib on my knees night after night for the Lord to spare him, and like that's a stone of remembrance. So just encouragement that to do it really practically as well.
Love that.
Yeah, those rhythms are so important for our lives, as we do have a tendency to forget, and the tyranny, the urgent, and everything. So it's really healthy to have that remembrance, and you got a living stones there, as you just
Yeah.
described.
I love
Beautiful.
it. Okay, so one of the things that I'm thinking about as I'm listening to the stages of your kids and your youngest who's foster now adopted, right?
Yeah.
It's just the idea that we don't do this life alone, and how much harder it is when we're feeling isolated. And that's the number one epidemic right now in the world is people feeling isolated and alone. Ironically, in a globally connected digital world. So speak to the value of community and the things that you've learned in the places where community really got you through those hardships.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think we all in theory agree with this. Like, yeah, I need people, I need some community. Most of us would, 90% of us, yet we're not quite willing to take that step to get us into what it takes to have community. Like, are we willing to be vulnerable? Are we willing to be authentic about what we're walking through? Are we willing to maybe not post that stuff on social that makes it all look pretty and perfect? It might turn off other people that we need in our lives. Are we willing to really value and treasure the people we have as opposed to, and I'm the worst of this, you guys, at looking at all that we don't. I mean, it's so easy for me. I mean, I'm one exclusion from a girls' trip away from thinking nobody likes me. Like, man, they all go on a girls' trip. I'm like, oh, this is it. Nobody likes me. Yet I have these deep friendships, bonds of people that the Lord has placed in my life. And so I sometimes talk about this when I'm talking about community and just that story in the Bible of, the 4 guys that took their buddy who was paralyzed to see Jesus and they couldn't quite get get in the door because there's so many people, right? And so did they give up and just go home or leave him laying on his mat? No, like they went up to the roof and cut a hole and lowered him because they knew that was the only way that he was going to get the life-saving healing that he needed. And I think about that, like, could we possibly buy into the fact that we really just need like 4 really crazy committed friends? And that's a metaphorical form. Maybe it's 3, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 7. But like, we need those friends that are going to show up when our marriage is hard. And we need those friends that are going to believe in our kids when they're doing ridiculous things. And we need those friends that believe in our dreams when we don't. We need the 4 that are going to drag our chubby butts right up the stairs and lower us in front of Jesus, not the other however many that are out there that just aren't our people either in this season or at all. And so I would just say, if we could get in a mindset of realizing how critical community is, and it's quality over quantity, and doesn't make these other people bad people. It doesn't mean like, oh man, a bunch of jerks out there. No, like there's lots of great people. But if studies show we can only really have, 4 or 5, 10 close friendships, then let's lean in hard on those, the ones that the Lord's put in front of us, and let's value those where they are. The flip side of that I'll add too is just that so often it's hard because some of the hurt that comes from our Christian community. And I felt it. I've grown up in church and I've had church hurt as much as anyone. I don't mean in a physical or unsafe way, but emotional church hurt. And I think that, one, you guys, we're somebody else's church hurt most likely. So let's start there and realize like maybe we're that to someone. We need to realize that like we got to have some grace for that. But the other thing is, we can't allow the missteps of humans to inform our beliefs about God, because only God is God. And so in the church, there's lots of people getting it wrong, ourselves included. And so let's continue to remember God is God and everybody else is not. But that community is incredible and it's critical. And we can walk this road together. And sometimes it's going to go seamlessly and sometimes it's going to be really hard. But you can't, I often say this, I say this in my book, if you were invited to go to the White House, but you wouldn't go in and meet the president and do all the things because you were offended by the music at the guards gate. Like that doesn't make sense, right? And so let's not be offended at church, maybe by someone who said something wrong, or maybe the music or whatever thing. Like, so let's not be so offended that we can't go through the walkway of the people of grace that are going to lead us back to the Lord. So my thoughts on community, but it doesn't come without some bumps and bruises. We all know that.
That is the cost.
Yeah. Cynthia, can you describe a little bit about what it's like to invite somebody in your small circle? Like when you invited somebody into your small circle, or you're teaching your kids how to do that, to invite somebody into their small circle, an invitation into that kind of community that maybe hasn't happened yet. And yeah, it's risky. How do you help them to, and help women and men, people in general, to do this, to take that step? We understand the why behind it. We need it, but the how does that play out? What kind of wisdom do you have from that?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Right? Aren't we all trying to figure that out? I think getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is key in this. I mean, I really, and it has been for me, and also Mike and I really have tried to impart this on our kids. But I'm most comfortable if I invite over my 3 friends that I know their husbands and I know their kids, and it all seems to work. But yet there's this whole dichotomy of people out there that the kindest thing I could do right now is invite them in. They need a place. I need them. And so it's this idea of just getting outside of ourselves a little bit. I used to tell my older ones when they were younger, I'm like, listen, give me 10 people you want to invite to your birthday party. And they would give the 10. I'm like, great, because we can actually have 15. Now I want 5 that would never think you would invite them to their birthday. And that was just our habit, like bringing people in, offering a seat at the table. And I think that's part of it. And you might start off, I do, start off being like, well, isn't that something nice I can do for someone? Well, no, actually, at the end of the day, it ends up being such a gift to you because you're letting people that you need in your life. You need those friendships. And so I would say just open the doors a little bit, make a seat at the table, stop worrying about if your house is clean enough, or if, your politics line up, or you have the same, income levels, or whatever the things are. We build all these like artificial barriers. We don't say them, but they are there. And we need to let go of that and just start inviting people in, asking the Holy Spirit, like, just make it clear to me, like, who's the person? Who are the people that need to be here? Who do my kids need to be with? And inviting them in, and let go of these perceived notions that our kids need to be in a certain friend group, or we need to be with the right moms, air quote, at the school, or whatever that looks like, and just open the door and see who the Lord brings into your life. And it's a big step, but if you can get, like I said, if you can get comfortable being a little uncomfortable, it's a game changer in finding community.
So good. A couple of things I'm hearing you say. One is that love initiates, and it's hard because everybody wants to be invited. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've said that before. I remember early on in our marriage, I'd be like, "I'm so lonely," and he's like, "You have so many friends," and I'm like, "I know, but they don't invite me. I'm the one initiating." Well, then the Lord really kind of helped me understand like that is part of what so many people are waiting for somebody, and that was something I learned early on being the new kid in a community. Like if I wanted to be invited in, I got to kind of step in and introduce myself. And so I
Yeah.
learned that skill early, and realizing that even in our 40s and our 50s, people are still waiting to be invited. And so that invitation, if you want to have good friends or want community, you kind of often have to be the one to ask. You can pray for somebody to invite you too, but
Yeah.
actually taking that action step to say, here, why don't we get together? So starting with initiating, that is such a huge piece. The other thing is I find so many families don't prioritize it,
Mhm.
but wish they had it. You know what I mean? It's like a theory of, yes, we need good friends, we need community, but in the crisis, when you don't have the people around in the good times, that's really necessary in the crisis points. And so everyone's busy. They're tired
Yeah.
at the end of the day. They don't want people around. Not everybody is an extrovert. So speak to those people who just feel like they don't have a lot of time for friends and
Yeah.
community. They're just trying to get by in their marriage and their kids and their work and call it good.
No, and I can appreciate that. I'm super extroverted, and so, but my husband's more introverted, and so finding that balance for us has been interesting because even with my kids, they're more introverted than I am. Most of the world's more introverted than I am, and so I used to have this perspective like if we're going to have over 5 people, we might as well have 25 because you still have to have the house clean and cook, and like let's have the world over. And so it's funny as we've worked that over the years. My kids are like, you know what, simmer down over there. Like we're fine with just a few people, but I will say, yeah, it's not an introverted extroverted thing. It's a community thing. It's the need to have people surrounding you that can build you up. Remember in the Bible when they held up Moses' arms, he was so tired and he couldn't. He had 2 guys that came alongside and held up their arms. That's what we need in our lives. Those people that can hold us up, and we can do that also. And so I would just say, like, it's just a commitment. In a new year, it's just a commitment. It's just making that decision, like most things in life. I'm just going to do it once a month or whatever your thing may be. I'm going to have some people over. I'm going to Tuesday nights make the spaghetti and whoever wants to come over, go old fashioned with it. We try to be so cool and trendy and all the new things. Like, I think our parents had it right in a lot of ways. Like, they just threw together whatever and had their friends over. My parents watched the James Dobson videos like on an old projector and had their friends over. Like, seriously, I'm like, what in the world? But I remember that as a kid. I remember them bonding and forming community, and it changed kind of how I do life
Yes.
because seeing my parents invite people in, and my parents both worked, they didn't have a ton of money, but making that a priority and sharing their life with people like that marked me. And I it's been something that's been important to me and I want for my kids. And so we really try to put an emphasis on that in our house. And so it's not, yeah, if you're more introverted, great, that's fine too. But just set some goals for yourself this year to kind of like, I'm going to branch out a little bit. I'm going to do this. Get involved in, your Bible studies, a local Bible study, obviously in the church, there's places to meet people, but people are lonely and people are looking for friendships. And so this isn't a hard reach right now.
Yeah, I love that. You are hitting it on the head when it says if you can't do it for you, do it for your kids and those that are watching. Because we want our kids to have good relationships and good community, but they learn by what we're doing. And so when they
Yeah.
don't see us having friendships or making time because we're so busy, that just gets passed down. So I love that your parents modeled that and you caught that. The other thing it reminded me of is just I've gone through the last 2 years, actually 3 years. We went through a really hard, kind of similar to what you were saying, where you're just like, God's not answering it the way that we thought on our timeline, and it's going left turn down a road. I was like, what? This is not what we expected. And I remember the Lord asking me very clearly to invite 5 people in to pray and to be that Aaron and to help hold Moses's arms up. Sorry, I'm trying to punch you in the face as I'm
Holding up
using
Jeff's
my
chin.
hands.
Happens all the time.
Yeah, it does. But it's that idea, like I didn't want to do it, Cynthia. I'm usually the strong. I'm usually the prayer partner. I'm the one who's helping hold other people's arms, and I didn't want to do it. I didn't. And again and again and again, I'd be like, oh, they don't want to pray for me again for this. There's no answer. And honestly, at the end of those 3 years, those women have thanked me because it grew their own faith. And it connected them in a way that they wouldn't have been connected otherwise. There's just so many things coming out of that. And I tell you, after like 5 texts about me complaining, I tried to like wrap it up in a bow, but God is good. And they wouldn't let me. They'd be like, hang in there. We got you. It's okay that you're upset. It's sad. This is hard. So just the risk that it takes.
Yeah.
It was hard. And it's still hard for me to ask them for prayer, even for the good things. But I'll never, ever do it differently. I don't want to be without a group like that in my life.
And you'll be there for them and have been.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
same thing with the guys.
And I think what you're saying, like as you're saying that, I'm thinking of my life, like my youngest one's got some learning differences. And this group of people came to me and said, we all have younger kids and older kids. The younger ones, a big gap like you do, and all of our younger ones have something going on with learning stuff. Could we come together once a month and pray? And I was like, what a gift that has been. Just these are not necessarily all of my everyday people, but these are people that we all are running the same lane in one respect. And like you're saying, we just prayed together, and it is hard. It for me, it's especially as I'm releasing a book right now, and I'm just needing to lean on other people. It's hard to do that. But one of my good friends said, like, let us be praying over this. Let us be a part of the miracle. Let us be a part of seeing what God's going to do. And he does that, unexpected yeses that he's giving you along the way. Like, let us be a part of it and watch it and see it. So, yeah. I will say one other thing if I can, guys. As much as I believe in community and friendships and modeling that, I do also believe, especially in parenting, we got to be willing to raise kids who can stand alone. And I think that's been the other side of the coin for me that I've realized, like I've seen, I want to, especially in today's culture, we all do. I think we want to raise kids that can stand alone because listen, as divided as we are as a country, as politically, economically, racially, in every respect, religiously, I mean, I want my kids to be able to do the things that are hard, but we can't raise kids who will stand alone if we don't let them. And so, and if we're not willing to do it ourselves, I mean, for us, again, it kind of goes back to foster care, but we didn't know anybody doing foster care. We thought that was for like the really like spiritual people or something. We're like, you got the wrong people, Lord. And that was kind of one of those moments where the Lord was like, no, I need you to go stand alone in this. And I watched that for our kids. And I would just encourage you, yes, community matters and friendships, all of those, but there will be times where we want to raise kids that can stand alone because they're going to need to, if they're going to live for the Lord. And so sometimes that means that we don't rush down to the school to get them in the right class, or we don't go rant and rave at the coach because they didn't get the play time, or we don't confront the mom who had the play date but didn't invite our kid. Like sometimes the gift is saying, you know what, you can do this. You can stand alone. We're here with you, but you can stand alone because the Lord will put us in those situations and allow that. And we're never truly alone. We know that, but it's hard for our kids to see that. So that would be my other encouragement, is just evaluating that. Build strong community, absolutely. But also realize there will be some seasons where the Lord calls us into a time of standing alone, and we need to be willing and able to do that, and our kids will catch that.
Well said. It's so good, because you're right. It happens a lot, and going upstream. And so we've got to prepare our kids for both and people just disappoint, and we were just having a conversation in our car ride, and our youngest was like, they disappoint a lot. And I'm like, yeah, and that's why our God is so good. He doesn't disappoint. And so when people let us down, he has our back and we can stand alone. So good, and a constant practice in our homes.
Yeah. So Cynthia, tell us a little bit more about the book. We'd love to hear a little bit more about this release.
Well, thanks so much for asking. Yeah, this is the first, like, really, really, y'all know this world, really, really published book I've done. I've done a million prayer journals and other things for Christian parenting and other places, and I've loved that. But like, as a part of like leading the practice of law and doing ministry, like the Lord just opened the door for me to write a book. I'm like, I wonder what we're going to talk about. Interesting. And it just became very evident that the Lord just wanted me to be who I am. And my hope is it's really funny. Like, life is messy, God is good. Like, that's just how we're going to boil it down. And my hope is it's really funny. But I also hope that there's just biblical truth in that that, yeah, we're going to walk some messy roads, and life is going to go off script. It already has for all of us, for sure. So let's just call it out. Let's laugh about it. But also, we've got to be able to find God in the middle of that, because if God is just on the Sunday mornings, like I felt that and I felt him and it's all, then that's not going to be enough, because I have more Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays and Thursday mornings than I have Sunday mornings. And I need to know how those two connect. Like, where does that connect? The mess with the actual, like, the theology. Because, if our theology doesn't line up with our reality, it's really not theology, right? It's just kind of like some good advice. And so what my hope is that we can line those two up. And by in this book, by just seeing these examples in my life, and just all of us can relate to them. I just taught a 16-year-old boy how to drive. Like, I nearly met Jesus, you guys. This was the end. And at the end of it, when I took this like deep breath of like, oh my gosh, like, he literally was like, your mama needs to yield. I'm like, what's going on? Who in the world has taught these heinous people to drive before and survived it? But in the middle of that, like, I just got to believe like God's in this. Like, we've got to be able to laugh at it. Those are the messy places. I'm like, okay, like, where is my theology meeting up with my reality? And so that's my hope for this book, that you can stop and you can laugh and it's relatable, and you can say like, yes, I've walked that road. And since I have kids of all ages, there's something for everyone,
Yes.
hopefully. But yeah, that's the heart behind it, is that life is messy, it's off script, but yeah, God is still good and he is faithful. And I sometimes say, if you can't find the faith in your own life, sometimes it's hard, borrow it from someone else. And I just want to offer that, like, borrow it from me if you need to. If you're walking a hard season, you're like, I don't know, is God that faithful? Is he in on my Tuesday mornings? Like, I just want to lend that to you and say, he's there and you will see it. It may not be today, it may not be in this decade, but you will see it. And so that's my hope for the book. And yeah, we'll see. It's been a new adventure for sure.
I'm excited for it. You are funny. And
Yeah.
I'm going to be annoyingly cheesy because this is just who I am sometimes. But
Okay, I'm in.
I really love people who are funny, Cynthia. I want you all around me. But there are some of us, I mean, I think I can be funny, but I just want you to give us some tips for those of us who I tend to hang out in the deep hard of life. And I can turn something really funny into something really sad really fast as part of or teachable. Like, I'm always trying to go. So give tips when you say, we can laugh. We need to be able to laugh now and not wait another year or 10 years before we laugh.
That was a good tip. Yep.
That was a good tip.
If you would laugh later, laugh now.
Teach one more. Tell me one more tip on how to help those of us to really appreciate and to be more, to find humor in life, but maybe just laugh more. Like,
Yeah.
one more tip. I'll get your book. That'll help too.
Well, I appreciate that, but yeah, I think of my kids. They call me a Karen, kind of the derogatory Karen, the mom that's always like, wah, wah, all the things. And so I've embraced it. Like, I now think it's funny. I mean, I literally, when I got on this podcast, I was putting my AirPods. One of my kids had renamed it to Karen's AirPods. I couldn't even find them for the Bluetooth because I'm like, who's Karen? I'm like, oh, they're funny. That's me. And so I just have learned to like laugh at it. I just can't take myself too seriously. So these are like an example. There was and this isn't funny. There was a horrible car wreck somewhere near our neighborhood and someone passed away. And so I was explaining to my kids, like, like most wrecks are within a mile of your house. And so my son's like snarky. He's like, we should move then. I'm like, okay, you're hilarious over here. So we're kind of laughing. So I drove them by to show them where it was, because I'm like, listen, stuff can happen. Well, then afterwards, my kids are going on and on about how I can take, kind of like what you just said there, like, you can take any fine moment and make it like, wah, wah. And they're like, seriously, you're driving us by? And so then we started laughing and talking about all the times where I've done that, where like, everyone's in their best place and I'm like, I have to bring out the mom teachable moment. Like, yeah, like in the midst of the stuff, still teach the lessons, you guys.
So
but like,
good.
especially as your kids get older, like, you got to be willing to laugh at it. And when they start pointing out like your little personality, I wouldn't say deficits, but maybe a little bit over here. I mean, I just say like, embrace it. Be like, yeah, totally. I'm with you on that. So
God's using it. I love it. We did that one time, Cynthia. We sat around the table and we were like, okay, everyone impersonate one another. And oh my gosh, we were laughing so hard because our girls had us down to a T. Anything and everything we had said in their last 15 years.
One of them played you, one of them played
so
me,
funny.
and we were dying.
But I had to work hard not to take it personal. It's like,
Well, that's the thing, right? You have to,
Right?
yeah. The other night well, not the other night, a month or two ago, at New Year's, we went to dinner. We take our kids like a fancy steakhouse or whatever, and we talk about everything. But we rate from 1 to 10 where we are in different areas of our life. And so as I was rating, one of the things, I can't remember what it was, but like, let's say it was spiritual. I was like, I think I was a 9 last year. My kids were like, no, I'd give it a 2. I'm like, wait, you weren't supposed to weigh in on it, you guys. No, you're right. Like you can take it personally. But my encouragement is just, if you got to find a way to find humor in life, and you may be a more serious personality, and that's totally great. Surround yourself by someone who's not. Some of my best friends are very, very serious, and I love that because they bring in the discernment, the wisdom. But I'm the comedic relief. I get invited to things all the time just because people are like, I just would rather laugh, and not because I'm that funny, but I'm willing to make fun of them and myself, and so it goes a long way. So find the humor in it, but also find the people around you that can find the humor in it, and don't take yourself too seriously would be my encouragement.
Good word. Okay, so how can people find your book and all your resources, Cynthia?
I'd love that. Okay, so yeah, the book is Life is Messy, God is Good, and it is in all the usual spots, Amazon, all the places, CynthiaYanof.com, anywhere, like you can find me there. And then my podcast is called Mesmerized with 2 S's. And so, yeah, after you listen to Jeff and Tara, you can tune on in over there. But that's kind of where I am. You can find me all the usual spots, and the book is out as of February 6th. So hoping it's a lot of fun and a good read for yourself and maybe some girlfriends that could use some laughter.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for bringing good humor and just a sense of lightness about our complex world and complex selves, right? And relationships. And we need that. God uses that in He created these things for us to find and discover and to enjoy and to not take ourselves too seriously, which is so easy to do, especially today with all the pressures and all the challenges. And He creates this awesome chemical oxytocin that is released when we laugh, and it bonds us together. And that was His good purpose. There's no negative side effects from that. You made me think about that more. I just want to laugh. Like I want to smile more. I mean, just the joy that comes from our physical bodies that He created and to engage in ways that are life-giving and good. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for taking us also into the depths of the why behind that. And we're looking forward to continuing to connect with you more in the future. Until then, thank you, listeners, for listening and tuning in, for staying committed to trying to continue to grow as humans and to have some laughter about that as we go in this journey, because there are some things that are quirky about us and others. And we are all in the same pool, right? We need Jesus and we need each other. And discovering the hows to do that well is a lifelong pursuit. So until next time, stay in the mix, pursuing that. We're right there with you. Well, did you know that we're not just podcasters? One of the best ways to connect with Tara and I and our whole team at Living Wholehearted is our website, livingwholehearted.com. There you're going to find the books that we've written, our e-courses, executive coaching, organizational development, and professional counseling services. And then one of our favorite things that we're up to these days, our Wholehearted Leadership Cohorts, where we take groups of leaders for 1 to 2 year journeys together. It's amazing. While you're there, for fresh content, make sure that you sign up for our e-newsletter. That's where we're putting out stuff every month that you want to keep close with. So visit livingwholehearted.com.
You can also join us on socials at living_wholehearted on Instagram, and we are Living Wholehearted on Facebook. You can also follow me at Tara Matson on Instagram. We love to engage with you personally there, so make sure you reach out. Leave us a review if you're enjoying this podcast.
Hey, thank you for caring about being the kind of person and leader that lives with integrity.